Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a chat about, rather remarkable work in many ways. It's Hans Pfitzner's Cantata von Deutscher Seele on the German soul, a rather controversial piece given Pfitzner's own political predilections. Now, let me be very, very clear. Pfitzner was not a Nazi. In fact, the Nazis were far too nice for Pfitzner. He was just as anti-Semitic and even more fascist than the Nazis were, but they couldn't stand him, probably because he hated everybody. He was kind of a bitter misanthrope because he felt he was the greatest composer of the universe and he wasn't getting the attention he deserved, of course, for all the right reasons. And then, of course, the fact that he was not a member of the Nazi Party but was virulently anti-Semitic is often followed in the apologia set by, some of his best friends were Jewish, including the conductor of the original performance of Von Deutscher Seele in 1921. Well, of course, anybody who would give him what he wanted was a FOP, friend of Pfitzner. And whether they were Jewish or not didn't matter. But really, aren't we past the point where some of my best friends are as an excuse for horrifying prejudice and otherwise, undesirable personal qualities? Now, of course, the personal qualities don't matter so much as the music matters, right? I mean, that's why I'm talking about it now. If I really felt that his revolting personality was disqualifying, I wouldn't be mentioning this at all. The truth of the matter is that I encountered this work in the most unpropitious way, and it was absolutely amazing. There was this evening, I remember this, I was a kid. I was like 10 years old, 12 years old. I was young. And I'm probably about, no, we were in our new house. Okay, so I was 12 or 13, around then. And I used to listen to an all-night radio show in WQXR. You may remember that, the radio station of the New York Times, which no longer exists. The radio station, not the New York Times. And they had an all-night radio feature. And one night, I was sick. I was really sick. I had a terrible asthma attack. I couldn't breathe, and I had like a, vaporizer going, and I was hepped up on, medication that did absolutely nothing for you except make your heart pound. It was adrenaline, and it really was a very unpleasant feeling. And I'm listening to this thing, and one of the things that they were going to play was Daphnis and Chloe in their all-nighter, which went from like midnight to 5 a.m. They said, but first, we're going to hear a rare work of Wagner, Das Liebesmahl der Apostel. Well, I don't know how many of you know that, but it's Wagner's worst piece of music, and even Wagner said so. It's a 40-minute long cantata, of which the first 30 minutes is written for a massive multi-part male choir, and it's the love feast of the apostles. It's in this sanctimonious, saccharine religious idiom. It's vile. And then in the last 10 minutes, the orchestra comes in, and they all scream and yell a bit, and then it's over. So when you're laying in bed trying to breathe and you're exhausted and it's like you're wheezing and you hear more wheezing coming out of the radio, I mean, you just hear this endless. It seemed endless. It's really only about 40 minutes long, but it seemed interminable. So it's finally over, and I thought, oh God, finally Daphnis and Chloe. Sheesh. And then the announcer said, but before Daphnis and Chloe, we're going to hear a fabulous choral work by Hans Pfitzner, von Deutscher Seele. It was the old Keilberth recording on Deutsche Grammophon, which had Fritz Wunderlich and who was it? Herta Topper and Agnes Giebel, all those people in it, I guess, or something. Anyway, I have the recording somewhere. It's somewhere around here. And I said to myself, on poems by Eichendorff, so I said to myself as I'm there gasping, how long could a cantata about the German soul possibly be? Well, silly me, an hour and a half later, it was still going on, and I was still gasping for air, and eventually I just sort of passed out and woke up during the choral interlude in Daphnis and Chloe. They finally got to Daphnis and Chloe, and I woke up at that interlude between, parts 1 and part 2, with the chorus is just sort of moaning, woo, which, when you're sick and trying to breathe and you're exhausted and 12 years old and hallucinating, I mean, it was spooky. It was a bad night. So that did not get my relationship to Pfitzner's music off on the best foot. Let's just put it that way. And it was a long time before I bothered to listen to von Deutsche Seele again. And it's actually, if we forget all about Pfitzner, which you sort of have to whenever you listen to his music, you gotta really just ignore him. It's sincere. It's sincere. It's patchy. You know, it's like I said, it's about 90 minutes long. How long is this performance? This is the best version of it, by the way, because I've heard them all. Lucky me. It was a live recording featuring the Deutsches Radio Symphonie-Orchester Berlin and the Berlin Radio Chorus, which is amazing, as always, under Ingo Metzmacher, who is wonderful in contemporary music and that sort of fin de siècle, decadent era and all that stuff. I mean, he did the complete Hartmann symphonies on EMI. He's very, very good at 20th century music, particularly. And so the soloists are Solveig Kringleborn, Nathalie Stutzmann, who's now conductor of the Atlantic Symphony. Good for her. Christopher Ventris and Robert Holl, they all sing really well. And so it's really a fine performance of sort of an albatross of a piece. But it has wonderful moments, because Pfitzner always has wonderful moments. That's the thing. The problem is that the wonderful moments have to add up to a wonderful Gesamtkunst. And they don't always. Anyway, so this piece is in two parts. First, Mensch und Natur, Man and Nature, modest title. And then Leben und Singen, Life and Song. Of course. Actually, the word German never appears in here. It's all Eichendorff poetry. It's lovely poetry. It really is. And they're mostly quite short poems. There's a lot of orchestral music. I mean, there's orchestral music everywhere. There's a double tone poem called Abend und Nacht, and in the first part, evening and then night. And there's death as postilion, postilion. The death is the postman, post horn thing, right? That's it's exciting, some of this orchestral stuff. And there's a gorgeous, Ergebung in the second part, which is devotion or submission to something. And there's an instrumental prelude, and between these things are songs. In fact, there's a whole song cycle built into the very end. And it's mostly pretty intimate. I mean, it has big, exciting moments and post-Wagnerian orgies of sound, sort of. But for the most part, it's fairly lyrical and intimate. And, it's sincerely felt. I mean, in 1921, when it was premiered, it was wildly successful. And it seemed to have had very few performances after that. Certainly after the Second World War, when Pfitzner's name was, in the mud because of his political leanings. It hasn't gotten much attention, although, like I said, DG did record it. Artie Nova recorded it. Schwann recorded it with Heinrich Hollreiser, who was, I think, a friend of Pfitzner at one point. So there are a few recordings of it. Do you want to hear it for yourself? Well, this is on Capriccio. It was originally on Phoenix, which is part of Capriccio. And like I said, it's the best version out there. This was recorded, I think, in 2008. That's when it came out originally, but it's still available. And I just felt, we haven't really talked about Pfitzner, and he did write some beautiful songs. I reviewed his CPO recording of the songs. It's on classicstoday.com. It's a gorgeous record. First-class stuff, really is. His orchestral music, abstract orchestral music, is pretty lousy and uninteresting. His masterpiece, such as it is supposed to be the opera Palestrina, which my good friend and opera critic Bob Levine describes as, Parsifal without the laughs. And, he never got what he deserved, and so good for him. There's a certain amount of schadenfreude that I feel in talking about him, but I do want to mention it because it's a major work. And it's a major work of the German choral repertoire, virtually unknown, but if you like Gurrelieder or you like these sort of big, blowsy German oratorio type things, then you may want to give this a shot. And despite the title, von Deutscher Seele, it really... It's not particularly parochial. Not at all. It's actually fairly ecumenical. And Pfitzner would probably be spinning in his grave to hear me say that. And tough noogies to him. We get the last laugh. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.